The frontier was built on blood and justice. Subscribe and relive the untamed West. The sun bled across the endless plains, turning the tall buffalo grass to fire. In that light, a boy watched the herds thunder by, his eyes wide, his breath caught somewhere between awe and destiny. His name was Wokini to his people, but the whites would later call him Roman Nose. To the Cheyenne, he was born beneath an omen. When the wind howled through the valley, the elders said the spirits were speaking his name. He grew up when the Great Plains still belonged to the horse and the bow. His tribe moved with the rhythm of the land, following the buffalo, guided by stories older than memory. His father was a quiet man, known for his skill with the lance. His mother, a healer, whispered to him that courage and spirit were stronger than iron. Even as a child, Wokini would wander far from camp, standing alone on the ridges, watching the sky, asking the wind what kind of man he was meant to be. When he came of age, he undertook the vision quest, a sacred rite that would decide his path. For 4 days he fasted atop a lonely hill, surrounded by nothing but dust and the cry of eagles. On the 4th night he dreamed of a thunderbird with wings of fire descending from the clouds to hand him a feathered bonnet. The spirit told him, "As long as this touches your head and your heart is clean, no bullet shall pierce you." When he returned to camp, the medicine man looked into his eyes and nodded. "You have seen the truth," he said. "You will become a warrior whose name will not die." From that day, Wokini was no longer just a boy. He trained with the dog soldiers, the most feared and honored warriors among the Cheyenne. They were men bound by sacred duty to defend their people, even at the cost of their lives. He learned to ride bareback, to shoot from horseback at full speed, to use the land as both weapon and shield. But what set him apart was not just skill, it was presence. Even among the dog soldiers, he seemed touched by something unearthly. When the tribes gathered, storytellers spoke of him, the warrior who could ride through storms of bullets untouched. The elders said the spirits walked with him. The women whispered his name with pride and fear, and the young warriors followed him into battle without hesitation. But peace was fading. The white man had come. Wagons, rails, promises, and guns. Treaties were made and broken like sticks in a fire. The buffalo, once endless, were slaughtered by the thousands. The land, once sacred, was marked by fences and blood. Roman Nose rose as the land cried out. He rode not for gold or glory, but to defend the soul of his people. In those early battles, he struck with lightning precision, raiding wagon trains, ambushing soldiers, but never killing without reason. To his followers, he was the embodiment of courage. To his enemies, he was the ghost they could never kill. They told stories of him among the soldiers, how he rode through gunfire untouched, how he defied bullets, how even when surrounded, he would ride through the smoke like a spirit. Many swore they had shot him, only to see him ride away laughing, his war bonnet blazing under the sun. But the truth was deeper. Roman Nose was not invincible because of magic alone. His strength came from belief, from the unshakable conviction that he fought with the blessing of the Great Spirit, that his cause was just. That faith made him fearless, and fearlessness was his armor. As the frontier closed in, his legend grew. The U.S. Army began to see him not just as a threat, but as a symbol, a living reminder that the plains would not die quietly. His name was spoken in outposts and taverns with equal parts dread and admiration. Roman Nose, the Cheyenne warrior who could not be killed. One night, as the fires burned low and the wind whispered across the camp, the old medicine man approached him. "Your name rides far," the elder said, "but remember, no man, not even one blessed by the spirits, can escape the path written for him. When your heart strays, so will your shield." Roman Nose nodded, though in his heart he did not believe. The spirits had chosen him. The land itself seemed to bow beneath his horse's hooves. How could death touch a man who had already become legend? And yet, far to the east, men were gathering. Frontier scouts hardened by war, led by a major who would one day meet him on a lonely island in the Arikari River. The wind carried a chill that night, the kind that comes before a storm. The plains were about to run red again. By 1868, the Great Plains were no longer the endless sanctuary of the Cheyenne. The railroads had carved steel scars across the land. Soldiers had built forts where buffalo once roamed free. Settlers arrived with wagons heavy with greed and fear, and above it all, the old spirits seemed to fall silent, drowned by the sound of gunfire and iron wheels. Roman Nose rode through this world like a shadow of what once was. His war party numbered only a few dozen, yet they carried the fury of an entire nation. Wherever his horse's hooves struck the ground, the dust seemed to whisper resistance. He had become a dog-soldier war chief, the highest honor his people could grant. His men would follow him into fire, for they believed the same as he did, that no bullet could touch the one chosen by the Great Spirit, and if he could not be killed, then perhaps neither could they. But even legends are men beneath the sky. That summer, Roman Nose's band camped near the Republican River, where the grass was tall and the air smelled of rain. Scouts brought word that white soldiers were moving across the plains again, led by a young officer named Major George Forsyth, a veteran of the Civil War known for his cold precision. Forsyth and his 40 scouts were hunting the dog soldiers, determined to end the raids once and for all. When Roman Nose heard this, he did not flinch. "Let them come," he said, his voice calm as stone. "They ride with bullets. We ride with thunder." The elders urged caution. "Their guns are many," said one. "Their rifles reach farther than arrows can fly." Roman Nose only smiled. "Then we will ride closer." That night he sat alone by the fire, turning the war bonnet in his hands, the same one blessed in his vision long ago. Its eagle feathers glowed red in the firelight, and the beads shimmered like drops of blood. He remembered the old medicine man's warning, "Keep your heart clean, or the blessing will fade." He had always believed his heart was pure, but now, as smoke curled into the dark, a shadow crept into his mind. During a recent raid, a soldier had insulted the sacred ways, and in a moment of rage, Roman Nose had struck him down, not in battle, but as vengeance. The act weighed heavy on him, though he refused to admit it. And yet, when he rose the next morning, something felt different. The sky was too still, the birds too quiet. His horse snorted uneasily. He ignored it. The spirits, he thought, would not abandon him now. By the time the sun rose high, the scouts had found the enemy. Across the river, Forsyth E.S. men were digging in on a narrow sandbar, an island barely large enough for their horses and wounded. They had been ambushed days before and now were surrounded, desperate, hungry, and nearly out of ammunition. It was the kind of fight Roman Nose lived for. He gathered his warriors at the edge of the ridge. From there, they could see the trapped soldiers below, small figures in blue, crouched behind makeshift barricades. The air shimmered with heat. Dust devils spun like ghosts across the plain. Roman Nose raised his hand and the warriors fell silent. He spoke not as a man, but as a force of nature. "Brothers," he said, "the white men have cut the heart from our land. They burn our villages, kill our women, steal our buffalo. Today, the wind carries our anger. Today, we remind them that the plains still belong to the Cheyenne." 100 voices roared in answer, their cries echoing off the canyon walls. But as Roman Nose prepared to ride, an old shaman ran toward him, panic in his eyes. "Do not wear the bonnet," he cried. "You ate this morning before cleansing your spirit. The charm is broken. The spirits will not protect you." The words struck Roman Nose like a lance. He froze, hand trembling over the feathered crown. To ride without it was to face death unblessed. To delay was to lose the battle. His men looked at him, waiting, believing. He could feel their faith pressing against him like the weight of the sky. He hesitated for only a moment. Then he lifted the bonnet high and placed it on his head. "If I die," he said quietly, "I die as a Cheyenne." He mounted his horse and turned to his men. The wind caught his feathers. The sun flared behind him, and for an instant he looked like something not quite human, half man, half storm. Then he gave the signal. The warriors charged down the slope, hundreds of hooves drumming the earth. Dust exploded in golden clouds as bullets whined through the air. The soldiers fired from behind their barricades, the sharp crack of rifles tearing the silence. Horses screamed. Arrows hissed. The battle became a living storm. Roman Nose rode at the front, his horse leaping over the fallen, his rifle flashing. Bullets sliced past him like angry bees, yet he did not slow. To his men he seemed invincible, a spirit made flesh. To the soldiers below he was terror itself, but the charm was broken. A shot rang out, a single, fateful sound that cut through the chaos. Roman Nose jerked in the saddle, his head snapping back. For a heartbeat, he stayed upright, eyes wide with disbelief. Then he slumped forward, the war bonnet slipping from his head, feathers scattering into the dust. The warriors saw him fall and wailed in fury. They fought harder, mad with grief, but the spell was gone. The charge broke. The survivors carried his body from the field, blood soaking the sacred feathers. As the sun sank, the plains went silent again. Only the wind moved, whispering through the grass like a prayer. Roman Nose, the warrior who could not be killed, was gone, or so the soldiers believed. The wind that swept over the Arikari River carried more than dust. It carried grief. It carried legend. When the smoke cleared from the battlefield, the soldiers huddled in silence, staring at the shape lying still among the sagebrush. They had heard the stories, how the Cheyenne warrior Roman Nose could ride through bullets untouched, how he was shielded by spirits. Now they saw his blood on the ground and wondered if they had just killed a man, or ended a curse. Major Forsyth watched from his makeshift barricade, his leg torn by a bullet, pain burning through him. Around him, his scouts were half mad from thirst and exhaustion. Yet when he saw the fallen warrior's body carried away by the retreating Cheyenne, a chill passed through him. Something in the way the warriors moved, solemn, reverent, unbroken, told him this was not the end. In the Cheyenne camp, the air was thick with sorrow. The warriors had brought Roman Nose's body home beneath a blanket of feathers. They laid him in the center of the circle, his war bonnet resting on his chest, his face calm as if in sleep. Old women wailed. Young men tore at their hair. Children hid behind their mothers, watching the unthinkable, the man who could not die lying silent among them. The old medicine man, his eyes like river stones, knelt beside the body. He touched the wound, then the broken bonnet. "The charm was true," he whispered, but his heart was troubled. The spirits do not guard those who doubt. One of the younger warriors stepped forward, fists clenched. "Then the spirits are cruel," he shouted. "He fought for them, bled for them." The elder looked up. "No," he said softly. "He fought for us, and that is why he will never die." They buried Roman Nose by the river, beneath a mound of earth and red stones. But from that day on, strange things began to happen on the plains. Hunters swore they saw a rider at dusk, standing on a distant ridge, his feathers catching the last light of the sun. Soldiers claimed to hear war cries in the wind, though no Cheyenne were near. Some said a lone horse would appear by the battlefield at night, snorting, restless, waiting for its rider. Whether ghost or memory, the name of Roman Nose began to move like wildfire through the frontier. Among the white settlers he became a symbol of the savage spirit, a warning told around campfires. But among his own people, he became something greater, a legend. In the winter that followed, Cheyenne camps would gather around their fires, and the storytellers would begin with the same words. There was once a warrior whose courage defied death itself. His heart was lightning. His spirit was thunder. and when the white men came to take the earth, he rose like a storm to meet them. Each retelling changed slightly. His horse became faster, his enemies more numerous, his powers more divine. In one version, no bullet ever struck him. In another, he rose after death to ride again under the full moon. Children fell asleep dreaming of him. Warriors woke ready to fight in his name. Even the elders, who had seen too many seasons to believe in fairy tales, began to wonder if perhaps the Great Spirit had not taken Roman Nose at all, but transformed him into something eternal. Years later, long after the dog soldiers had been broken, after the buffalo were gone, and the reservations built, old scouts and settlers would still whisper about that day at Beecher Island. They remembered the sight of a warrior charging through gunfire without fear. They remembered how, even dying, he never turned away. Major Forsyth, now an older man with a limp that never healed, wrote in his report, "Roman Nose was the bravest man I ever saw. His courage bordered on the supernatural." But what Forsyth could never explain, and what haunted him for years, was the dream he had weeks after the battle. In it, he stood again on the island, but the river ran red as fire. Out of the mist came a rider, tall and proud, his feathers glowing like embers. Forsyth raised his rifle, but his hands trembled. The rider stopped before him, silent, then said in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere, "You think you killed me, white soldier, but you cannot kill the wind." Forsyth woke drenched in sweat, his room cold as stone. Outside, a storm raged over the plains. The story spread among the men who had fought that day, each one claiming to see strange shapes in the clouds, to hear hoofbeats at night. Some dismissed it as superstition, others simply stopped talking about it. But for the Cheyenne, the meaning was clear. Roman Nose had not died. He had become one with the land. The wind that howled through the canyons, the thunder that rolled over the prairie, the lightning that struck where injustice walked. Mothers still sang his name to their sons. Warriors still painted his image on their shields. And when the Cheyenne rode to battle in years to come, they whispered a prayer. "Ride with us, Roman Nose. Lend us your courage. Lend us your fire." The plains had lost their greatest warrior, but they had gained something far more powerful, a legend that could never be buried, and somewhere, on the lonely ridges where the sky meets the grass, the wind still carries his name, Roman Nose. The years passed, and the prairie changed. The endless herds of buffalo, once black waves rolling to the horizon, were gone, replaced by iron rails and telegraph poles. The songs of the Cheyenne grew quieter, their fires fewer, their warriors scattered. The land that had echoed with hoofbeats and war cries now hummed with the sound of trains. Yet, even as the world changed, one name refused to die: Roman Nose. For the white settlers he had become a ghost story, a warning whispered to wagon trains crossing the plains. "Don't travel at night," they'd say, "for the wind carries the spirit of the Red Eagle. Cross the river with greed in your heart, and he'll come for you." But for the Cheyenne, the memory of Roman Nose was sacred. He was not merely a hero, he was the heartbeat of a people. In the smoky lodges of the northern plains, elders told his story with reverence. His name was invoked in ceremonies of bravery, his deeds painted on hides and shields. To the young, he was proof that courage could outlive death. To the old, he was a reminder that the land itself remembered. When the U.S. government pushed the remaining Cheyenne into reservations, stripping away their hunting grounds, one elder stood and spoke. "You may take our land," he said, "but you will never take the wind, and the wind is Roman Nose." Even the U.S. soldiers, men hardened by war, carried a strange respect for him. Many who fought at Beecher Island would never forget that charging figure, the horse leaping through the smoke, the long feathers trailing, the defiance in his eyes. Some wrote letters home saying that they had not fought a man but a spirit. One scout, Thomas Aldrich, would later confess in his journal, "When I saw him fall, I felt no triumph. I felt shame, for I knew that on that day, something pure in this world had died. As the frontier turned into farmland and the stories of the Wild West became myths, Roman Nose transformed from warrior to legend. Artists painted him in noble poses, his face stern, his eyes like fire. Writers told of his last charge as if it were destiny, not defeat. Some even claimed he was never truly killed, that he rode into the sunset and vanished among the thunderclouds, waiting for the day his people would rise again. And perhaps, in a way, they were right. Because in every uprising, every spark of resistance from the tribes that refused to vanish, the name of Roman Nose returned like a whisper in the wind. When Sitting Bull stood against the U.S. Army, he spoke of those who came before him, the ones who refused to bow. Among those names was Roman Nose. When the Northern Cheyenne fought to escape from Indian Territory and return home in the late 1870s, the warriors painted lightning bolts on their faces, the same symbol Roman Nose once wore before battle. He had become a symbol of the spirit that cannot be conquered. Even decades later, in the early 1900s, when anthropologists came to photograph the vanishing tribes, they found something unexpected. A young Cheyenne man, his hair braided and his eyes burning with pride, told them, "We do not vanish. The wind still rides with us. You call him Roman Nose, we call him Brother Thunder." And so, in the face of history's erasure, the legend lived on, not as a ghost story, but as defiance made flesh. In the white man's towns, the name Roman Nose began to appear in stranger ways. A small frontier town in Oklahoma took his name. Artists painted his likeness in museums. Western novels turned him into a character, half demon, half hero. Hollywood would later try to tame his legend, turning him into another nameless Indian chief in dime store films. But the truth refused to stay buried. Historians, years later, would dig up the accounts of Beecher Island and find something extraordinary. Almost every soldier, even those who hated the Cheyenne, spoke of Roman Nose with respect. They called him fearless, majestic, a warrior of the old world. A U.S. cavalry officer wrote, "If courage were coin, Roman Nose was the richest man I ever met." And beyond those words, a strange pattern appeared in the oral histories. No matter who told the story, soldier, settler, or Cheyenne, the ending was always the same. He did not die like other men. In the reservation years that followed, the old Cheyenne prophets would still gather to pray for strength. Before any great ceremony or decision, one would whisper into the night, "Roman Nose, guide us. Show us how to stand proud again." And sometimes when the wind roared through the plains, tents would tremble and fires would flicker. The elders would nod and smile. "The wind is answering," they'd say. Generations passed. The wars ended. The buffalo were gone. But still under the great sky of the plains, the wind carried his memory. Children born a century later would grow up hearing the story of a warrior who could not be killed, who defied both bullet and empire. And even those who no longer believed in spirits would feel something stir inside them when they spoke his name. Roman Nose. It was no longer just a name, it was a promise that courage leaves footprints no time can erase. And though the world of the plains had been carved into borders and highways, some said that on quiet nights, if you stood still and listened, you could still hear it, a distant echo of hooves, the whisper of feathers in the wind, and the thunder of a warrior who refused to die. The story of Roman Nose did not truly end on the banks of the Arikari River. It began there, in the dust, in the smoke, in the echo of gunfire that rolled across the prairie like thunder. When the shooting stopped and the air cleared, the Cheyenne war chief lay still among the tall grass. His war bonnet, once bright with eagle feathers, was stained dark with blood and earth. Around him, the bodies of his warriors were silent, their spirits already rising into the vast blue sky. The Battle of Beecher Island was over, but something far greater had been born that day, a legend that would refuse to die. For the soldiers who survived, The memory of the man they called the Giant of the Plains haunted their dreams. They spoke of his bravery, his fearlessness, his refusal to retreat even when surrounded by death. For the Cheyenne, he became more than a warrior. He became a spirit of resistance, the embodiment of what it meant to stand proud when the world was collapsing. Years passed and the war drums faded into history. The American frontier marched forward, railroads carving scars into the open plains, towns rising where buffalo once roamed. The Cheyenne people were pushed onto reservations, their freedom stripped, their traditions buried under the weight of progress. But the name Roman Nose continued to ride the wind like a ghost that refused to vanish. Some said that on certain nights when the moon was full and the plains were quiet, you could still hear the sound of distant hoofbeats, a single horse charging across the open land, untamed and eternal. The elders whispered that it was Roman Nose, still protecting his people, still defying the empire that could never truly conquer him. In the white man's world, his name became legend. Writers called him the last war chief of the plains. Painters tried to capture his face, the stern eyes, the proud features, the calm strength that made even his enemies respect him. But none of them ever got it right. Because Roman Nose wasn't just a man. He was a symbol of everything the West had gained and everything it had lost. He represented a time when courage meant standing against impossible odds. A time when freedom wasn't given, but fought for tooth and nail. And a time when honor meant more than survival. Even the U.S. soldiers who once called him an enemy later spoke of him with admiration. One survivor of Beecher Island wrote in his diary, "He was no savage beast. He was a soldier, a general of his own kind, and when he rode toward us, death rode with him." The land where he fell has changed little since that day. The wind still moves through the dry grass like a whisper of ghosts. The river still flows, quieter now, slower, as if mourning the warriors it once carried away, and the hills still stand, silent witnesses to a battle that shaped two worlds. Visitors come to the site, some out of curiosity, others out of reverence. They walk the same ground where Roman Nose once charged, feeling the weight of history pressing down like the summer heat. Some claim they can still sense him, not as a spirit of vengeance, but as a guardian of the plains. One old Cheyenne storyteller once said, "Roman Nose is not dead. He rides in the storm. When thunder rolls, that is his voice. When lightning strikes, that is his lance." And maybe he was right, because legends like his do not fade, they transform. Over time, historians tried to explain his story, to separate the myth from the man. They wrote books, debated his motives, his tactics, even his death. Some called him a hero, others a rebel. But those who truly understood the land knew the truth. Roman Nose was neither saint nor sinner. He was simply a man who refused to kneel. In the end, that's what made him immortal. He wasn't fighting for victory. He was fighting for dignity, for the right to live as his ancestors had lived, to die as a free man rather than live as a captive. And in doing so, he became something far greater than a warrior. He became a symbol of resistance, not just for his people, but for anyone who has ever stood defiant in the face of overwhelming power. Today, when you look out across the Great Plains at sunset, you can almost see it. The golden light spilling across endless grass, the horizon painted in fire, the wind whispering through the sagebrush. For a brief moment, if you listen closely, it feels as though time has stopped. And in that stillness, you can almost hear him, the faint echo of hoofbeats, the distant cry of a war chant carried by the wind. Maybe it's your imagination, or maybe it's the spirit of a man who refused to vanish into history. Roman Nose didn't just fight a battle. He fought for the soul of his people, and in that fight, he became something death could never touch. He became the last thunder of the plains. "They called him a savage," the narrator whispers, voice soft and grave. But he was something the world no longer understood, a man who believed that honor was worth dying for, a man whose courage still rides the wind. As the final image fades, a silhouette of a rider against a blood-red sunset, the voice returns one last time. The wind still rides with Roman nose. Call to action. If you believe that stories like this deserve to live forever, if you believe that courage, freedom, and honor are worth remembering, then join us on this journey through history's untold legends. Subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share this story, so the spirit of the Great Plains will never fade. Because some stories aren't just meant to be told, they're meant to be remembered.